Hello, Sea Wolves, and welcome back to the show. So, over the last 24 hours, of course, a lot has happened again. We'll look at the upcoming weekend and, of course, the ever-approaching possible weather window for the rest of the fleet to start the race. And we're now actually 3 days off. So we have some real workable weather models that we can, we can really kind of dive into all the details and see if it's really possible to go or not. And I can already tell you, it's going to be interesting. We're going to look at, of course, what's happening with all teams in their race towards the equator. And we're going to also look at kind of my top 5 of which Imocas, which captains to watch out for, I think are going to have the best chance of perhaps winning this race and why. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we do that, of course, I hope that you're ready with something delicious in your perhaps original Sea Wolf mug. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. Ooh, delicious. So let's start with this possible weather window that's coming up. So we talked about maybe Sunday evening, maybe Monday. Well, as we're getting closer, we're kind of 3 days away now. So it's a little bit, it's more and more possible to say something about the weather with a little bit more accuracy now. The models are really starting to matter. So let's dive into the screen here. And as you can see, I kind of already focused us here on France. And so, of course, the line that we're going to kind of have to sail is from Le Havre here, kind of around, and then basically past Cape Finisterre, which is here, which is kind of like from here, let's say, we're sailing, quote unquote, into safety. But that's kind of the problem zone where we have lots of winds, constantly the storms coming into Biscay, big breaking waves, etc. So that's kind of the area that we need to clear. Now, before we look at the actual weather, one thing to keep into account is if we look at the tracker of the race so far. So, for example, wait a minute, let's erase this line here for a second. If we look at well, I have the class 40 selected here, for example, and we look at the time it took them in pretty severe weather also, right, to get from Le Havre to Lorient. We see here All Grande Pirelli, so the number 1, did it in 1 day and 10 hours. And we see most of the rest of the fleet taking 1 day and, well, most of them like about 1 day and 11 hours, and then maybe half an hour more. But a lot of the fleet came in kind of more or less simultaneously. Right, so that's kind of a good benchmark, and we know that the Imocas are quite a bit faster usually than the class 40. If we look at the Ocean 50s, which are, you know, a little bit faster again, we see that they kind of did the trip. We saw Solidaires and Peloton arrived in 20 hours 44 minutes. So about 4 hours less than a day, right? So that gives us kind of an interesting benchmark to kind of look at the distance. We know that the weather is going to be, no matter what we do, like pretty heavy, right? So if we look again at the weather map and we kind of reestablish this line that I just drawn of kind of the course that we have to go. So yeah, we kind of know that, you know, to do kind of this distance, so from here to sort of to Lorient, took an hour, like let's say about a day, right? So that would probably have taken the Imocas also maybe slightly less than a day, but somewhere around a day. So we can kind of see that, and I also ran this through, you know, several plotters that I have access to, and I kind of arrived for you know, using an Imoca Polar, so kind of the Imoca data for possible speeds, etc., with the weather routing, that it would take something around like 2 days and 20 hours in kind of like a middle scenario, maybe a little less in a more optimistic scenario, a little longer in a longer scenario. So that means that we have, you know, 2 days and let's say 20 hours, 22 hours. That's kind of my benchmark that I'm taking now for kind of clearing this route. So that's kind of up to Cape Finisterre. Now, if we look, so we have the weather now, right? And well, if we fast forward a little bit, we see this massive second storm coming in. So this is going to be tomorrow afternoon. So Biscay is going to be again hit really hard. Then as we go into Sunday, so this is kind of midnight Sunday, and here we see that kind of the entire area of weather there is starting to get considerably less wind. So it's still strong, right? I mean, we're still looking at something like 29 knots, so that's average speeds, 25, 31, and that means that the gusts are maybe 10 or 20 knots stronger. So that's still, can be 50, 45 knots, things like that. But I mean, in this boat, I've been in 45 knots gust on the North Sea, and I'm still here. So the Imocas can definitely handle that sort of weather. But we also see that the direction is pretty much, very, very much really in the opposite direction. So they're going to be very much upwinding if they would leave, let's say, Sunday or sort of Sunday morning. So this kind of midnight Saturday evening, right? If we scroll a little bit further, then we see getting considerably calmer. So this is Sunday, middle of the day, and then as we scroll further, so let's say that this is kind of our start point. Well, one day further, then we see a fairly calm area. But then if we go another day further, so towards Tuesday afternoon, then we see quite nicely clear. But then as we go towards the end of Tuesday, so that is as we are sort of in the model approaching a point that might be somewhere here after like a day or two, we see that by the end of Tuesday going towards Wednesday, that another storm is going to more or less hit exactly that position at Finisterre. Now it's not going to be as strong as the previous storm. This is something that I think the Imocas can handle, but still, if you look at some of the projected speeds, especially if we go a little bit so towards that morning, 32 knots. If we take a bit of the more underlying numbers, we see that I see gust here up to 50, in some cases 60 knots. So still very, very strong winds. Wave states can be high. We can actually look at the waves here also. So again, a dark red, so that's waves of like 6 meters, 5-6 meters. So again, a very, very serious situation. And we also see that when we look at the wind again, that the wind here is going to turn kind of against the boat. So if we were to depart, let's say Sunday late in the day, Monday early in the morning, so first we're going to be basically going upwind, but that's something that the boats can handle. And then as we get to kind of the 2-day mark, we see that around here, so around Tuesday, the wind starts to turn, and we're getting the wind more kind of against the direction we're going in. And at the point where this storm will really hit, we can see that the wind is going pretty much coming directly out of the direction that the boat will want to go in. So that means that during the exact moment that they want to kind of pass Finisterre, they may possibly be in a situation where that will be the hardest it could possibly be, with very strong stormy winds coming exactly from the direction where they want to go. So that's kind of the step-by-step, more in-depth of like what they could run into. But for my mind, because if we scroll a little bit further, so if we go into Monday late, then we see after a bit of actually no wind at all around Finisterre there. So then you have kind of a new problem, and we see sort of lighter winds, but all kind of in the wrong direction. And then as we scroll further, we see like this big ridge of like no wind crossing the Bay of Biscay. So that's kind of Tuesday. Then we go, so Thursday, then we go into Friday. We see the wind kind of completely turning in the wrong direction again, with still a ridge here. So basically after this window that kind of starts Sunday evening, morning, Monday later in the day, after that we're going to get a lot of variable weather. You can see here already in the screen another kind of more stronger system coming in again from the west after that. So that's towards the end of next week, towards Friday. So this window is quite precarious, and as far as the route length, so 2 days and 20 hours, 2 days and maybe 22 hours, so more or less 3 days, right? That should be, it's not just that it's possible, but it's also that it's just enough to kind of get out of there before we either get another storm or lose the wind, which could then kind of trap the fleet for a much longer time while waiting, and then as they would get out of that ridge, then we see this other storm hitting again. So it certainly doesn't get easier if the fleet waits, let's say. It certainly won't really give a better window, but if they go for that window, it's going to be a very strong window. So basically from the start, so if we say like Monday morning very early, if you want to really take the widest possible window, then they're still going to have like pretty strong winds. So let's say, you know, the harbor opens in the morning, the gates open, they have to get out there, put the starting line, etc. But let's say that they can do an 11 in the morning or 12 in the day, so midday, then this would be the weather image. So that looks actually pretty green, looks pretty good. Then, you know, as they kind of make their way up the strait, down towards Brest, we see that most of the rest of the storm will kind of like pass ahead of them into Biscay, and by the time that they get to Brest, that weather will be kind of past, so they'll be kind of running into this picture as we go into Tuesday. Well, that's a very nice clear road with a beautiful beam reach across the Bay of Biscay, so good wind, not super strong, actually pretty nice. But then as we go towards the end of Tuesday, beginning of Wednesday, we see that the wind kind of turns in their disfavor, and then this storm hits Finisterre just as they're kind of trying to pass there. So that's going to be you know, a strong end to an otherwise, you know, pretty interesting start. So yeah, I don't know, like it's going to be a tough decision for the race control, for the classes to decide what they do. As far as I can see, there is definitely a window there. I think the Imocas can make it through, and yeah, if they start, I would probably estimate it would be Monday, maybe 12 o'clock, something like that would probably be, based on what the weather models are looking at right now, a really good start window. If they go any later, they'll just run into the storm in the middle of Biscay. If they go any earlier, then they have to start in really, really strong weather. And if they go, you know, so late that they will avoid this storm, then they'll run into calms and ridges in the Bay of Biscay, and they'll get stuck there for a while, and then they'll get hit with another storm as they try to make their way out. So there isn't a lot of great options as far as, you know, really steady weather to go. So that's as far as the Imocas and the rest of the fleet is concerned. Then the all teams, because they are of course right now making their way towards or past the equator, and yeah, right now Maxi Banque Populaire still in first place, so that kind of like turn around the windy side of Madeira really paid off, and they actually extended their lead quite a bit now. About 100, and there's something like 60 nautical miles ahead of Edmonton Rothschild, so a pretty good distance now as they're making it past the Cape Verde's Islands. And yeah, the weather for them actually looks pretty good also. As you can see here, they're kind of nicely heading for the tip of the doldrum area here. And if we take up the wind prediction, so if we kind of look up the place where they are right now kind of sailing down in this direction, and yeah, we can of course see this kind of area of the doldrums kind of coming off of South Africa there, or well, Africa there. And yeah, the thing is that the course as it currently goes is kind of just seeming to hit kind of the tip of that area. But of course, the more west they go, so if we go ahead into time, we see that that plume of basically not so much wind kind of coming off of Africa, you know, it's always kind of fluctuating. It's a bit like a tip of water or wind. It's kind of swirling in different directions, right? And so we can see that it extends a bit, sometimes it shortens a bit, and yeah, like basically the golden rule is the more they go to the west, the bigger the chances of keeping the wind. On the other hand, of course, because the route takes them to the buoy here in San Pedro and São Paulo, yeah, the more west they go, the further away that the more that kind of lengthens their route toward that buoy. So it's a bit of like, do we want to go more west and make sure that we keep the wind, or do we want to keep as close to the ideal course as possible? And that's going to be kind of the decision, you know, for all of the captains to take. How much risk do you take? How close to the ideal line do you want to go? Because as you can also see here, that ideal line is really crossing like right through the tip of that lower wind zone. So yeah, how much extra speed is it worth to take a little bit of extra distance? That within racing, sailing is always kind of the big questions. Yeah, a little bit more distance for a bit more wind. Is it worth it? Well, time will tell. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on. And so in third place we see SVR Les Arctiques. So Dibu Ultime 3 in fourth place, and Actuel in fifth, but all of them doing great speed. So right now I see basically the spread between 32.2 and 35.2, even 35.8 knots. I see Rachel is a little bit faster at the moment, but so they're all just blasting along in great weather. And yeah, I guess we'll see tomorrow if anything happens, but I don't really expect any lead changes or anything major to change right now, because well, somewhere in the next like 15 hours I think they will kind of get to that sort of tip area where it gets interesting, where they might lose the wind, etc. So somewhere tomorrow in the afternoon, around maybe 12 or something, that's when we kind of will see if anybody gets stuck. And of course, looking at the field right now, Actuel and Sodibu are at the greatest risk because they are situated most to the east. So they might fall behind a little bit more, because I think for them the wise move is probably going to be to still go west a little bit more than they are right now, and so that's going to be a little bit more extra distance for them. But yeah, we'll see what they do. So that's it for the Ultime update, and that kind of brings us to my kind of top 5 for and a little bit of prediction and thinking ahead of what are some interesting boats to watch in the Imoca fleet for this upcoming TJV. And of course, many of you also followed the ocean race during the kind of the Corona period, and was of course myself also part of that, so super cool. And yeah, we saw of course several of the Imocas participating in that race, but actually most of the Imocas not participating. We did see, because it was a teamed race, that also a good number of Imoca captains participated on the other boats. So they kind of teamed up. They were having teams of 4 or 5, sometimes up to 7 people on board. And so yeah, they all of course did get some experience, some extra lots of a one time around the world extra miles from that race. So that's a mountain of experience. On the other hand, it was crude experience. So from my mind, the big question of this TJV in a lot of ways is going to be, will the experience from a teamed from a group team run around the world on an Imoca, will that translate to, in this case of course, a double-handed Imoca race? So that's very different from having 4 or 5 or even 6 crew on board. And so will that translate? And of course ultimately we will also see in the Vendée, will that translate to solo performance, because that's again of course a completely different league. And so that kind of also really goes into what I think the top 5 will be, or what my top 5 is. And so the boats and kind of captains that I'm personally most interested in and looking at are number 1, Thomas Rouillant, linked out, because of course he's been doing really well, won the Route to Run in first place, but was not on any of the Imocas during the ocean race, so he didn't participate in that at all as far as I know, but has always had a very solid performance record. Of course did the previous Vendée, so it's not like he's new to this type of racing. He's like just one of the best, so definitely going to be looking out for that. Has a new boat also, so we'll see kind of what that mix does. We have Chirel, so Jeremy Bijou, which I talked about a little bit more yesterday. One of the most advanced boats. He was, of course, in the last Vendée Globe also, I think, absolutely kind of the favorite winner. And if you remember, of course, he got some major damage. I think it was in the second day or the third day of the race. Had to go back, repair, and then still was kind of like a tiger catching up with everybody. But he was like a week behind or something, and yeah, that was just too far. But if he had been able to continue his run at the same speed that he did, I think he would have absolutely won the Vendée. So you know, even in his old boat. So with this new boat, I think he's very, very competitive. Third in the Route de Rhum, so definitely one of the boats to watch. Then of course Charlie Dallin, but he's not in this race because he has some medical issues, so he will participate in the start, but then he'll jump off so that his new boat, because that's important for the qualification rules, can participate in the Vendée, but so he's not really racing, so we can't really count him in. But he was also on 11th hour during the ocean race, so he also got that ocean race experience. So if he were in here, I think he'd be absolutely lethal. Then we have Johan Richomme on Arkea Perplex, and he of course, well, new boat, very cool boat. You saw it in our toast 2 days ago, I think. Looks very cool, did very well in the speed runs, and he was also on Team Wholesome in the ocean race, so he also did get that ocean race extra experience compared to some of the captains who did not. Yeah, on top of that, sort of we have Boris, of course, who also got the full ocean race experience, but in a themed way. And so yeah, in the Route de Rhum wasn't at that point that competitive, or at least ended up a bit more lower in the ranking. So not quite sure what to make of that, but I'll definitely be very curious to see how he does in this particular race. I think also in the previous Vendée, it was a bit later that Boris really started to shine, right? In the beginning he was kind of in the pack, but then as the race progressed, his kind of qualities shine more and more, and that's also, I think, something about the Vendée, because the race is so long. It kind of separates the sprinters from the long distance races, where maybe some people do very well in the beginning, exerting a lot of energy, and then kind of fall off, while others are able to really continue that effort throughout the whole race, and that's really what you need to win super long races. And this race, of course, is long, but not really long enough. I think it's just up to that point where a sprinter would kind of start to fall off, and then the long range skills sort of really kick in. So we're not going to really see that in this race, although it is pretty long. But so those are going to be the boats for me that I'm going to be watching the most. So that's Thomas Rouillant, Charlie Bijou, Maxime Sorel, because he did also really well in the Route de Rhum. New boat also after he did of course the previous Vendée. So that's going to be very cool. Johan Richomme and Boris, and of course Sam Davis also had the Volvo Ocean experience, so also a boat to watch, but previously she'd never really been in the front, let's say. Pip Hare also was on the Bureau Valet during the ocean race, you know, of course one of my personal favorites, but also hasn't been really in the front of the race, and of course has a new boat, fully rebuilt. And as far as I understand it, should be able to do about 95% of the performance of a new boat. So could be competitive, but we'll have to see. She's personally also never really been in the front of the pack before, so we'll wait and see. And 11th hour, of course, Charlie would be also one of the favorites were he in the race, but he's not here, so we can't really put him in the group. But those are the boats that I'm going to be watching, or at least those are kind of my favorites for the race right now. So very curious also what your favorites are and why. Put them in the comments. Let's compare and see what we think. Also, if you have any interesting details about certain boats that you're curious about, put it in the comments, because as we go into the race, we'll do more and more also technical views of little cool quirks and tweaks and things that people are doing, but then hopefully we'll have video of it actually in action, so it's a bit more fun to talk about it that way. And yeah, that's I guess it for this update. So thank you again very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and see you again tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.